No request made.
Okay. Then I want to note one change to the agenda. On the agenda, we have, let's see, we have Natalie Branoski doing her presentation after Kurt. So the only change to the agenda is actually just switching the order of those two. That was a request from Natalie and Kurt. That is the presentation on workforce development, and then the presentation from Tompkins County Area Development. So there's just that small switch, but otherwise the agenda is the same. Minutes approval. Can I have someone move the July 23rd minutes? I see Mike. Can I have a second?
Martha, yeah, second.
Great, thank you, Martha. We do a roll call. Mike?
Here.
Deborah? Oh, I'm sorry, Henry?
Yes.
You're an honorary member, Deborah, always. Martha?
Yes.
And Annie?
Yes.
Wonderful. So there has been a lot added to this agenda, so I'm going to keep this really short. We are going to have a conversation about broadband today. I expect this to be the beginning of a long conversation, not just because it's a long conversation and issue here, but because it's a long conversation and issue nationally as well as here. So just know that I probably am going to have to cut it shorter than we would like for having this conversation, but Jen Gregory, who is the executive director of ST8, Southern Tier 8, for which we are a member, has been working on this issue since 2009. So she could probably talk to us about it all day and then some, and we'd still have more questions. So that is one piece. The other is that we will be talking in this conversation about the Southern Tier Broadband Coalition, and Deborah, myself, and the other representatives for Tompkins County at Southern Tier 8, which is Katie Borgella and Heather McDaniels. We will all be meeting with Steve Manning, who is the CEO of Southern Tier Broadband Coalition, to get more information that we can bring back at the next month's meeting so we can continue this conversation. So there are actions being taken, including hopefully some of us after these meetings speaking with TCAT to get a better sense of what efforts individual municipalities are doing, and whether or not we as a county can become part of the regional approach that's happening. So more to come on that later in this meeting. I don't want to take too much time, but I did want to let people know, give people an update that it is an issue, as we know, because of COVID. It's been brought up to the surface, but it has been an issue. I did send everyone the report, the assessment and report that Brindisi put together. Hopefully everybody got a chance to read it. And that may come up during this conversation as well. So hopefully everybody feels prepared. There were two PowerPoint presentations, or a PowerPoint presentation and a report also from ST8 that I sent to everyone. So with that, I'm going to move on to committee member reports. See if anybody has any for this meeting. Seeing none, then I will keep moving on. County administrators report. Good, that'll give us some more time for discussion. Is the county administrator here or a representative of the county?
No, Anna, no one has joined the meeting from county administration yet.
Okay, well, if he does join in, then I will bring him. In. So that'll be another change to the agenda, and I'll check in with him. Workforce development, moving right along. So this is the change. I had workforce development, update on unemployment. I am going to move that down to part of the conversation of Tompkins County Area Development per request. As I said, I sent that email out to everyone last night. So Katie, I hope you have had your coffee. So I'm going to jump right to you for the Commissioner of Planning and Sustainability report.
Great. Well, good to see everybody. I just have a couple of items. I wanted to let you know that Nick Helmholt in my office has been working on issuing an RFP for the Shared Services Project on gathering data for short-term rentals. So that is moving along. He's got a team of people to evaluate the proposals when we get them in, and he's expecting that that RFP will be released shortly, and that'll be gathering data for a 12-month period after the contracting begins. As part of that, he asked CJ Randall out in Lansing to serve on the RFP evaluation committee, and she in turn invited him to go speak to the planning board out in Lansing, which he did, and they had a good conversation about the topic and the extent of short-term rentals. It's an important conversation in the town right now. And also wanted to let you know that the National Park Service has begun a feasibility study to assess establishment of a Finger Lakes National Heritage Area. So that includes the study area being Cayuga County, Chemung, Cortland, Livingston, Monroe, Onondaga, Ontario, Schuyler, Steuben, Tioga, Tompkins, Wayne, and Yates counties. So it's kind of an exciting development, I think. These studies take about 3 years to complete, and they are in their first year of the study. They are in the process of putting together a context study is what they call it, and they're going to be releasing that hopefully in late September for review, and I'll be sure to share that with all of you when that comes in. That's going to be looking at the natural and cultural context of the study area and the conceptual boundary, and just trying to get a sense of whether this is even something the public and local governments would like to see in this area. So just wanted to give you a heads up that that is brewing along. And then I think Megan actually is going to talk to you a little bit about the rental assistance and all things CDBG.
Thank you, Megan. Thank you, Katie.
Yeah.
Good morning. Yeah, just a quick update with thanks to David and INHS for keeping track of all of our numbers on our rental assistance. And I'll note that our state colleagues are finding all of these changes challenging to manage on their end as well. So we're all trucking along. And they did note in our last phone call that I think that they're up to around 6 communities total that have reprogrammed CDBG in New York State for rental assistance, although we were the first. And I think Ulster and Oneida counties have joined us now as well. So in terms of applications to the rental assistance program, there have been 63 to the county for the county's pot of funds, 47 for the cities. And out of that 63, 24 have been determined to be ineligible. We're seeing, the funds roll out fairly slowly initially because the enhanced unemployment was putting many people kind of over the income threshold. But also there are a number of restrictions, unfortunately, with these funds, in addition to getting both, the tenant and the landlord on board with all the agreements and things. So we have 22 that are in the final processing stages right now, and additional ones in the pipeline. So things are rolling, although more slowly than we had originally anticipated. And on the city's side, they've had 20 of the 47 applications determined ineligible by the criteria. So that has led to a question that I just wanted to bounce off of all of you today for kind of an initial impression. With CDBG in the past, when we've done things like rehab, they have kind of the pots in our budget for different types of rehab, in terms of state budgeting. And it's typically just a formulaic administrative process if we need to move money with the state's agreement. But because this year, this was an unusual circumstance where we were allowed to move money out of rehab and into this rental assistance, we recommended initially moving all of it. INHS is seeing that given the restrictions really on the money, that and the large amount that we had, that there's a good chance we may not be able to spend all of it down during the term of our grant. And so they have already kind of raised the question to us about possibly reprogramming a portion of these funds back into rehab for low to moderate income homeowners. So that way we would be tackling kind of the homeownership side at the same time we're doing the rental assistance side. And so we need to do some more research to kind of make our best expectations. They had a number of people lined up for rehab when everything shut down due to the restrictions on working, in people's homes and things like that. So we would come back to you with some, more information and a proposal about an amount of money to perhaps move back into rehab. And normally we wouldn't bring this through a committee or legislature, but I thought that you all would at least want to be aware and then maybe kind of have an informal approval at an HUD meeting, since we don't typically do resolutions or things for this sort of thing. But just wanted to kind of take the temperature and see if that sounded like a kind of a good game plan with all of you.
Megan, did you say 24 were unqualified out of the 63 in the county?
That's correct so far.
And what percentage of the funding has been used as a percentage, and what total amount do we have left?
I don't have the percentage, but I can say we have about $528,000 left, so a pretty significant amount.
And we started with,
I think it was around 584. David, correct me if I'm wrong. I want to say 584, 589 total.
did anyone else have any questions before I ask my other questions? Martha? Oh, your hands just showed up now. How interesting.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. I had my hand up when Katie was speaking. So Megan, it does seem this is really slow and really small. You said 22 are still in final processing. So will more of if those families get through the process, would more of that 528 get spent down?
Yes, and we've got another 20 or so, but I think the thing for us to remember is that we're limited to paying no more than 3 months of rent. So it's not kind of an unlimited amount of money per household. So yeah.
Right. This isn't the cure-all we were hoping it was going to be. I do have a question about Katie's point about the Finger Lakes Heritage Area. So I guess I would, I think things are going to start crashing as the lack of the federal assistance addition to unemployment, starts going through people's household incomes. So I'm not sure I'd want to back away from the program yet. I guess I would want to see if we could push it out even stronger before we send it back for a different purpose. But I'm open to other people's thoughts.
Annie?
Thank you. First, just to follow up on what Martha was saying, as far as, for instance, the unemployment assistance, I thought I did hear within the last week that Governor Cuomo was going to look at paying the extra $100 that or the $100 that would be our share of the $400 for the unemployment. But even if that doesn't go through, the number of people that I've talked to that fall through the cracks that just don't get unemployment because they were self-employed and for various reasons they don't qualify, or people that cobble together several part-time jobs, and there's just various reasons, or that people might not apply or might not be eligible for unemployment, and or they were just working a small part-time job. So my question is that Megan, how long is it taking people to go through? It sounds like it's taking people to go through the process once they apply, at least a month. I'm just guessing how long it takes that to go through.
I think there's a lot of variation because people that you need both the documentation of your income loss due to COVID, as well as kind of your financial information, and ultimately the landlord signs an agreement as well as the tenant. So all of that adds dynamics. So it really varies from person to person. Some landlords are very much on board. I'll say some landlords, frankly, are not. So there's a lot of variety out there. I will say we've had conversations with the state where they asked us not to request disbursements more than once a week. So INHS is getting us, as soon as they can put someone through. And we've had some folks that were in kind of urgent straits. So really fast tracking as fast as we can as long as we've got the documentation that we can actually get the state's disbursement.
Well, I really trust, you being able to do this as best you can. And you also asked about going forward, if we were going to lose this money versus put it back into rehab in some other area. So I'm totally on board with that, or whatever you decide needs to be done. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Annie. Henry?
Yes, thanks, Megan. Are people able to reapply since they lost their $600 benefit at the end of July for the application for rental assistance?
Yes, they can update their paperwork with INHS. And I will say, because INHS is running a number of kind of programs under this umbrella, they're working hard behind the scenes that if somebody can't fit with one pot of money, to see if any other pot available they could be eligible for.
Okay, and you talked about the city, which I know did not have as much funding as we did. Are they tapped out yet?
I actually don't know the answer to that.
This is David. They had funding for 50 households, so and we had funding for around 200 households. So they're much closer to tapped out than we are, but they still have a little bit left.
Although I thought 20 were ineligible of the 47 that applied, so they're only halfway, correct?
Yes.
Okay, which is closer than ours.
Also, Katie, can you tell me more about the short-term leasing, short-term rental study that's going to be done?
Sure. It's not really a study. It's a
Okay.
contracting with they're private vendors that do searches of the properties that are under short-term rental platforms. And actually, I see Nick Helmholtz on this call. Nick, maybe you can answer it more completely than I can. It's a data collection thing, though. It's not a study of short-term rentals.
Yeah, that's accurate. So the RFP is titled Short-Term Rental Monitoring and Analytics. The idea would be to contract with a firm who would provide us with a sort of a 12-month analysis of our local market. And they would do this through a piece of software that's proprietary that would scan our county on a daily or more frequent basis to look at the most popular short-term rental websites like Airbnb, VRBO, Craigslist, other ones that are out there, and capture information about those listings to determine, for our purposes primarily, which ones are in compliance with our hotel room occupancy tax. We would also be able to use this information to support municipal efforts, such as ones underway with the town of Ithaca, town of Lansing, city of Ithaca, and others that are interested in this topic and from a regulatory aspect. They have a lot of questions about the number of short-term rentals within their municipalities and the activity that's going on. So that's why this was packaged as a shared services proposal, because we're really aiming to support our partner communities within the county.
Okay, thank you.
Martha, is your hand up again, or is that still up? I'm gonna let you
Yeah.
go, Deborah.
Thanks. Yeah, so that's what I thought. I thought this was what Jason had talked about back in the fall, about monitoring what properties actually are showing up on these rental platforms and making sure we have a better idea, trying to have a better idea of how many units are actually available for short-term rentals in the county, which right now we've been guessing. That's right?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, great. So of course, I'm sure it'll also be distorted in some ways I can't like guess at, but with the pandemic, maybe there are going to be more units available because, or maybe there will be fewer. I don't know. I did have a question about on the rehab money going to rental assistance. Maybe we can. I mean, if the 22 families in our bucket that are in the pipeline, if they were to get through and actually get the funding, would that still wouldn't spend down most of the money? Is that right, Megan?
That's right. I wouldn't. We have a pretty significant amount to work with, and the issue we have with rehab is that it takes a good chunk of time to get that all set. It also oftentimes involves NYSERDA programs to try to get our money to go further, and we would need to actually have the work done before the grant completion date. So.
Okay, this bureaucracy is so much fun. So that also suggests the weather in the winter season might be an issue. You'd like to get some of that going if possible, because.
Yeah, I will say COVID fell at a particularly bad time for us because INHS had done a significant amount of work to get rehab clients lined up. And then, of course, the work itself could not proceed. So I think they do have a number of homeowners that they can kind of sort out who has projects that can be done in winter weather versus not, and that sort of thing, to try to time it appropriately.
Okay, I guess I back up with what I said before. It's like whatever you guys think is best. Sounds great. Katie, on the Finger Lakes Heritage Area, is that what you called it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. National Finger Lakes National Heritage Area.
Is this related to the bill that was just signed that Chuck Schumer was here promoting a year or so ago, and it was just signed into law where there's new money for the national parks maintenance?
I don't know if it's part of that. I do know it was from a March 2019. That's when Congress authorized the Secretary for the Interior to do this study.
Okay. And what would it mean, actually? What would this be setting us up to become a national heritage area? And if so, what does that mean?
That's a great question. I don't actually know that much about this program at this point. They're in their early stages of the analysis, but I would imagine it would mean quite a bit for the tourism industry and that type of thing. But I don't know if there are actual funds that are available. I would think there would be some sort of funding to protect and enhance the natural and cultural assets.
Yeah, I think there is typically a small amount of funding associated with this. I wouldn't, I can find some examples of other regions that have used it and to promote their heritage areas, if you'd like.
Okay, that's great. Thanks very much.
I'm going to move on to Deborah, and then we're going to move on to the next topic because we have many presentations today. So Deborah.
Yeah, I'll try to be quick. Although apropos of the last topic, we've got the Erie Canal Heritage Area right next door, so it should be easy to find out what the benefits of that are. My question relates to converting the rental money to rehab money, which of course is an excellent idea. We don't want to leave money on the table. I'm wondering, Katie and I were talking yesterday about the shortage of funding programs for rehabs that make existing housing more energy efficient. And I'm wondering if we could use some of this money, or if INHS could use it to prioritize those kind of rehabs.
Yeah, I'll say I think we're on our third rehab program through CDBG money. And although energy is not CDBG's focus, we're able to tie that in with the health and safety aspect as well. So that is wrapped into the project. So each house, they're receiving energy audits. We did this with our home ownership program as well. So we're always trying to get as much energy work. That's part of also the reason, although it creates time delays, that we also try to work with clients because they typically qualify for some of the NYSERDA programs as well. So to kind of combine NYSERDA and CDBG to get them the safest home possible, but hopefully the most energy efficient one we can.
Thank you.
I will add that this makes it much more admin heavy on our end to make that happen, but we're committed to it. It's important.
Thank you.
And Deborah, that was my question, so thank you. We're on the same page. I do want to honor your question to get a straw poll of the group of whether or not we would support transitioning the money, some or all of the money back. I would support whatever the staff sees in this regard. I know you recognize that both are really important, and if you see that it's not going to be used and we want to make sure it gets used, I would want to support that to happen. And I do know the rehab is just as important, so I would support that. Mike?
Yes.
Annie?
Yes.
Henry?
Yes.
Martha?
Yeah, I'd support that.
Great. Thanks, everyone, and thank you for the presentation.
Can I just say one quick comment?
Yep.
So I was thinking about what Deborah brought up as far as energy efficiency. And I don't know if we can loop it in, but it would be great if somehow at some point it could be looped in that energy efficiency is about affordability, because it does save money. So if at some point that could be branded under that or somehow, I don't know. Thank you.
I think we need some culture shift at the federal level. We'll get
Right.
on.
Right.
But I couldn't agree more, Annie.
Thank you.
So Nick, thank you for being here. The tourism, I know you've been working very hard on all things tourism, and what you're bringing to us today is a possible shift from 3% to 5% of the short-term rentals and small rental under 10 units, to bring parity between those and the rentals above 10 units. Would you give us an introduction? It was a very thorough written introduction, but it would be great if you could give a summary.
Yeah, certainly. Thank you. So this has been a topic that I think has been on my mind almost since when I started this position a couple of years ago. So just for a bit of background, Tompkins County initially set a hotel room tax in the 80s. That was at 3%, and it stayed that way until 1999, when the tax rate was increased to 5%. However, there was an exception put into that law that parked the tax at 3% for all lodging with 10 rooms or fewer. So at that time, in 99, this was sort of your inns and bed and breakfasts, very traditional sort of smaller properties. And really, I think there was the idea at the point that by allowing a lower tax rate for these properties, you would create a market incentive to direct some consumers, some travelers, to choose those over larger hotels. In the 21 years since then, a lot has changed in the tourism landscape. Most notably, the real growth of online travel agents and short-term rental websites. Online travel agents or websites like kayak.com or hotels.com. People can go on and search for accommodations, and they'll pull up, results from, the whole playing field basically of everybody that's out there. And then I think we're all familiar at this point with Airbnb and its capacity to allow individual homeowners the ability to rent out rooms or spaces within properties they own. So we've been tracking this, and the thing we've really been noticing in the last few years is that the this market has been growing. This small lodging sector, as we're sort of calling it, it's not, you know, labeling it as bed and breakfast inns as our law does, is not exactly, I think, descriptive in people's mind. You know, when we think of bed and breakfast, you think of an establishment that's built for that purpose, or, you know, it was maybe built originally as a farmhouse and has been renovated to that purpose. But nowadays, the market seems to be moving much more towards these short-term rentals, where people are converting, whether it's a spare bedroom or a separate suite within their home, to be used as a short-term rental property for transient guests. So we see evidence of this in a couple of different ways, most directly in our room tax collection. So there's a graph on the second page of that memo that shows how through approximately 2014, you know, we had a very stable balance between the room tax we collected from our hotels and the room tax we collected from the bed and breakfast portion. And then starting around 2014, 15, that starts to slip. And, you know, we're going from consistently collecting 95% from hotels to down to about 87%. So that's a real clear indication that that market is growing. We also have data from other sources. The CVB currently gets monthly reports from a website called alltherooms.com. And this is like very high level analytics, looking at the top 2 websites that do short-term rental bookings in our market, and that's Airbnb and VRBO. And you know, we're seeing that there's, you know, several hundred, if not 1,000 potentially rooms listed at any given time within the county, and that they're charging rates that are comparable to hotels. So the conclusion that, you know, this draws me to, and I think others within the STPB, is that there's really no need to have a lower tax rate for this segment of the market. The need initially, you know, in '99, I think was a well-intentioned idea to find a way to incentivize people to you know, use these bed and breakfasts and make sure that they were being patronized, and also to help out those parts of the community. However, what we're seeing is that help is no longer needed within the vast majority of this market segment, and that where we are right now is a much different place than we were in 1999. So we're recommending that, I should say, the STPB voted to recommend that a change to the local law, which would remove this exemption, and would have a standard 5% tax rate across the board for all lodging within the community. So that's the recommendation. You know, we're working internally here to coordinate pieces so that if this is approved, that this could go into effect as early as December of this year. That would line up with our room tax collection calendar. And yeah, that's basically where we're at. And I don't think, oh, and we'd also need to notify and work with Airbnb, because with Airbnb, we currently have a separate voluntary collection agreement whereby they collect the room tax on behalf of their hosts within Tompkins County, and then remit that to the county. So there need to be an amendment to that agreement as well. So I've been working with the county attorney to begin work on that. I think that about covers it. I'm happy to answer any questions that committee has.
Just one intro so that we have this information. In the assessment that you're doing, is one of the questions that you're asking whether or not the traditional Airbnbs and inns are also listing on the sites like VRBO and Airbnb?
So we are aware of several of, you know, the bed and breakfasts that predate Airbnb are using, whether it's Airbnb or other websites similar to it, to make sales. There are probably a few out there. I mean, it's a bit of we could definitely look into this in a little more detail, but it's sort of a variety of how people book their their accommodations these days, and a bit of it comes down to the owner's preference. You know, if some owners of bed and breakfasts, you know, prefer to have nobody take any cut from the sale. They want to be able to have 100% of whatever sale come into in his revenue. Others, you know, will make the trade-off to have a larger volume of sales through a website like Airbnb, but then pay a commission effectively to Airbnb for that. So it's a mix out there. There's, you know, I think there was this idea in maybe 5 or so years ago that there was, you know, pure, you know, this you know, clear wall between what was an Airbnb and what was a traditional bed and breakfast. That there is no wall anymore. It's a gray area, because the traditional, or the historic, I should say, bed and breakfasts do use websites like Airbnb to book transactions.
Thank you, Nick. This was very thorough. Does anyone else have questions? Deborah, I see your hand is up. Is that from a previous question? All right, so Annie and then Martha.
Thank you, Anna and Nick. So, and maybe this is something you've gone over before. So if someone has a short-term rental, I'm assuming they don't have to serve breakfast. But
That's correct.
So if it's a short-term rental, I believe it's like less than 30 days or something. Is that what it's categorized at?
Yeah. So our local law has another exemption for between, you know, a transient occupant and a long-term occupant, and we define it as 30 days. Other counties do it at different rates, but 30 days is probably the most common that I've seen.
Okay, so if someone has one of these short-term rentals, then if they are not on Airbnb, if they're either on some other site or like you said, just doing it directly to the consumer, how do they pay the tax? Do they pay that directly to the county, or how does that work?
Correct. Yeah. So if you're booking, let's just say you're booking it directly, right? You just have a shingle out in front of your cottage. It says, you know, for rent, you know, whatever, and somebody books it for one night. The process is that you register your property with the county finance office, and it's a one-page registration form, and we keep it on file, and then you remit taxes quarterly.
Have we ever had any issues with people not doing that?
Yeah, that's part of the reason we're doing the study. I should say that the RFP, as we were talking about earlier, there's evidence of significant non-compliance in that space.
Right. So with people not even signed up to do it, and then how about as far as people that have signed up to do it but just aren't paying also?
That's a little bit of a trickier question. Yeah, I mean, if somebody is registered and either not paying the full amount or not paying in a timely fashion, you know, part of what we're trying to get at with our the RFP is to identify that in the smaller lodgings. We have data for larger properties, for the hotels, basically, through other private data sources we have access to, but we don't have that for a lot of these smaller properties. So there's no good means of comparison. So for instance, if John Doe on Route 89 is renting out his lake house, 12 weeks a year, but he's only paying taxes for 2 weeks. It's hard for us to know that right now with having very little data. We're hoping, and we're working, I should say, to get that data in a way that's usable and would be compelling to make sure that those taxes are paid.
Okay. And then as I know several people in my area that are now starting to do Airbnb for extra income, is there some way that they would automatically learn that that's something that they should be paying?
Right. So if you're just doing Airbnb, if you have a extra unit or bedroom in your house and you're just doing Airbnb, Airbnb takes care of everything for you. So you don't need to do anything as a host, right? Your local taxes are already accounted for as a part of Airbnb's role as the platform, right? It gets tricky when you try to do Airbnb plus something else or just something else and not Airbnb, because then you have to register yourself with the county as a hotel. So one of the things I'd like to see down the road, and this is probably a next year project, is getting a local agreement in place with VRBO. They're the second largest platform in our county. That would cover a significant portion then of the short-term rental activity within the county. We'd still have a few stragglers out there, and but with those two in place, I think we'd be our tax compliance would go up pretty substantially.
Thank you very much.
I want to just urge us to keep our questions as short as we can. We have 3 more presentations today, but this is a really important topic. I have Henry and then Martha.
Yes. Nick, I was wondering, have you surveyed any of the bed and breakfast or anybody else about this possible increase in tax?
Not at this stage, no. We've not done any surveys of this group.
Okay, and I assume you don't know what the effects of COVID has had on this group?
We have, pretty limited data on this segment. We do have a few months of the reports from all the rooms. We are seeing from that the market is shrinking a little bit in the supply, but demand appears to be pretty stable. I think it's going to be a bit of a bumpy road, as we've heard from some of the other committee members. Some people are adding spaces onto Airbnb and sites like this as a way to generate income at this time. Other people, I think, are seeing the travel demand that they normally had seen dry up. So it's a bit of a shakeout, I think. We'll know a little more probably. Well, I don't know. We're gonna learn a little more every month as data comes in about the situation. And I can say that this market behaves a lot differently than our traditional hotels, and they who do business with larger groups that book blocks of rooms. That's where we've really seen a lot of fall off in the lodging sector, because the short-term rental piece really of the market really does do mostly leisure business. The effects of the COVID so far have been a little more nuanced than they have been on the the hotels.
Okay, thank you.
Just for clarification, Nick, of what you were saying to Henry's question, it's the comparison of Airbnb and the short-term rentals to hotels and whether or not there should be parity between the two of them. If I recall, at STPB, there was a reduction in Airbnb and VRBO by 13%, but it was like 80% from the hotels during the same time. So yeah, it's about not whether they're being hurt, but the relative comparison to the hotels that we are currently taxing at a higher rate. So I just wanted to make that clarification. Martha?
Yeah, thanks, Nick. Just want to make sure if anybody's wondering, the guests will pay the tax. The host will pass through, whether it's an individual or whether it's through Airbnb or whatever. The host is passing through that tax, so it's paid by the visitor. Do you anticipate any problem getting Airbnb to agree to this increase?
I don't. I've reviewed the agreement we have with them. We will need to do an amendment just to make it clear that the new tax rate is in place once that's once the legislature makes that change. I've identified that language. I think we'll if there are any hangups or glitches, we'll keep the committee informed as it moves forward. But I think the intent of their agreement was to come into compliance with local law, and as local law has changed, I don't think that intent will change.
All right, and a hotel pays sales tax as well as room tax, correct?
That's correct. Yes.
But the short-term rentals only pay the room tax.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, so this is a bit of a nuance in state law, that by and large, whether cottages, cabins, everything kind of within the short-term rental space is not subject to sales tax. There have been efforts at the state level from the hospitality industry to change that, to make sure that those properties do pay sales tax as well. That potentially would be a part of a bigger statewide law relating to short-term rentals. So I don't see that changing anytime between now and next year.
Okay, go get them on VRBO.
Thanks.
So we need to actually move the first of these two resolutions onto the floor. This is scheduling a public hearing for local law of the number of 2020, a local law amending local law number 4 of 1989, the Tompkins County Hotel Room Occupancy Tax Law, amending the exemption in section 150-12 of the Tompkins County Code, and this is ID 9495. Can I have someone move this onto the floor? As Martha, seconded by Mike Sigler. Any last questions? Hopefully not. I'm going to do a roll call unless I see hands. Martha?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Annie?
Yes.
Henry?
Yes.
And I am a yes. So thank you, Nick. And I will move to the second resolution of these two. And that is adoption of local law of this number of 2020, a local law amending local law number 4 of 1989, the Tompkins County Hotel Room Occupancy Tax Law, amending the exemption in section 150-12 of the Tompkins County Code. And this is 9496, ID 9496. Annie moves. Can I have a second? Martha? I'm going to do a roll call. Martha?
Yes.
Annie?
Yes.
Henry?
No.
Mike?
Yes.
Okay, that is 4 out of 5. So that also passes out of committee. Thank you, Nick, so much for your work on this. I know you've been doing this since you got here. You've been researching this, so very much appreciated. And now I want to move to David West for the housing snapshot that he has been waiting to present to us for a very long time. Has presented at a Chamber of Commerce, if I remember correct, you presented data on this early this year, or maybe it was even end of last year at Cinemapolis, which I appreciated seeing, trying to remember what event that was. But thank you for being here, David, and please take it away.
Hi, Anna. I'm happy to share. Just to clarify, what I presented that you were mentioning was actually the 2018 data, and this is 2019 data. So we're on our second update of this information. Hopefully my screen sharing is working well here. So that's a great segue to what is this? This is a point in time review of the best available data every year. Working with housing data is very difficult because it is slow to come in, requires surveys. So what we're working with here is the American Community Survey data is a major component. This data, we use 5 years of surveys from the American Community Survey. So each year when we get an update, it's for the previous 5 years. So this report is working with the 2019 American Community Survey data. Also data from our own Department of Assessment, the local Tompkins Ithaca Board of Realtors, data for Tompkins County, data from HUD. I'd also add in there the New York State Realtors Association. So what we want to do is take a moment to review our housing strategy and our housing needs assessment to ensure that those documents that are informing our policies are still valid. And we're doing this annually to keep on track. This is our second annual review. Just a review of what the housing strategy was. This was based on the 2016 Housing Needs Assessment. It was endorsed by the legislature in 2017. The data that it uses is from 2015. So all of the things that we're looking at are progress since 2015. The strategy set specific targets for senior housing, rental housing below median income, rental for sale homes over and under 200,000, and student beds. It's worth noting, because we'll look at data for the whole market, that the strategy does not set any metrics for market rate rental housing. And that's something that ends up being paired in with all of the data that we get, because we don't only have data for rental that serves below median income. So the short answer to this question is the housing strategy still valid? It is. And let's look at some of the successes that we've had recently. So reviewing the targets that we set, we've definitely seen progress in addressing our shortage of available housing. That was the main takeaway from the strategy and the needs assessment. We don't have as many units as we need. We're making progress towards that end. We're starting to see measurable results. But like last year's review of the data, our affordable housing production continues to fall short of strategy targets. We have definitely increased the amount of low-income housing tax credit projects. We have not seen a significant increase in for-sale affordable housing production. And that's one of the spots that we see the biggest difference between what the strategy says we should be doing and what we're actually getting. So some things to celebrate. Since 2015 in Tompkins County, we've added over 2,600 new units of housing. Just in 2019, almost 600 new units. 13% of all units added since 2015 have been in projects that are subsidized for low and moderate income households. And in 2019, a full 18% of the new units are for low and moderate income households. So we're seeing an increase for that year's production of housing. And a big portion of that is projects like Milton Meadows. This is kind of a huge one. 89% of new units developed in 2019 are in development focus areas. This is significantly more than we've seen in previous years. A lot of this is due to increased housing production in the city of Ithaca, but also in town of Lansing's town center. And this is above our goal. When we look at the rental market, this data we actually had in time for the last report, so the next update hasn't come out yet, but our 40th percentile rents, which is the point where 40% of rents are less and 60% of rents are more. This is used to create what's called the fair market rents for HUD's, a lot of HUD programs, including Section 8. Fair market rents or 40th percentile rents have stayed relatively steady for 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units. We've seen those rents increasing for studio units and for 4 bedroom units. In the for sale market, we've seen our median sale price going up. faster than inflation. So if you look at this graph on top, the green line is the average sale price from the Board of Realtors. In blue is the median sale price for the county. This is from NYSAR. And what I'm tracking is the inflation rate from 2015 point till now for both of those pieces of data. And you'll see they're both going up faster than inflation. But over on the right-hand side, you can see some comparisons. We have the Northeast region, New York State, the U.S. median, and then you can see where Tompkins median is compared to those other data points. So price is important, but not as important as cost burden. Cost burden is the ratio between people's income and their housing prices. So when we look at cost burden, we see that renters in Tompkins County continue to be significantly more likely to be cost burdened than homeowners. And you'll notice this graph compared to one that I presented with the last set of data, the disparity between renters and owners has increased. So the cost burden for owners has gone down since the last data, and the cost burden for renters has gone up. So comparing that information to what we know about employment and population, these data points have been really tough nuts to crack for us. One of the issues is that employment data gets put out and then revised for 3 years after it's initially put out. And generally what happens is the data gets put out, and then the next year they revise it upwards, and then the next year they revise it upwards again, and then it might stabilize at some point. So 2019's most recent employment growth number was very low. But what we saw is that the number that they're now reporting for 2018 is higher than what they were reporting at last year. And the number they were previously reporting for 2017 has been adjusted up as well. So I expect that currently the low number for 2019 will be adjusted upward. And when we look at the longer trend, so far we're very close to what was estimated for the housing needs assessment, which was 1% annual employment growth. We are going to keep track of this because we are seeing, as numbers initially come out, they're definitely lower than what we were expecting. Population estimates, we're showing a slight decrease in population in the most recent data. That was not expected by the housing needs assessment. We know that the margin of error for population change is large, and we are hoping that we'll have good data in the 2020 census, although this has been a rough census year as well, so we'll see how that comes out. But again, with an estimate that is below the number that drives the housing needs assessment model, we'll keep an eye on that. So the overview of trends and how they're impacting the strategy targets. The trends that we projected from 2015 have been mostly borne out with those two caveats. The assumptions about our need for new housing units continue to be valid. We definitely still have a shortage, especially of rental housing, that's driving the high price of rental housing and the high cost burden. And we will continue at the Department of Planning and Sustainability to implement the housing strategy and continue monitoring data and assumptions for the future. I wanted to include, this is data from 2019. There's not really data from 2020 in here because that takes a while to get. And that will be included in the next report. But because we are more than halfway through the year, I thought it made sense to just address COVID-19 will almost certainly impact the housing market. how it will impact the housing market is still very much up in the air. There's factors that could definitely raise the price of housing. There's factors that could definitely reduce the price of housing. I'd say so far we're seeing the factors that could raise the price more than the factors that could reduce the price. But we are hearing from realtors, and in fact, I'm actually getting calls at my office from newly mobile workers who are looking to move to Tompkins County because they have a high income in a high cost housing market, and maybe they're in New York City, they're spending $5,000 a month in rent, and they see that they could buy a house. One person I talked to was looking at a house in Cayuga Heights for less than half what they're paying for rent for a walk-up apartment in Brooklyn. That sounds pretty nice when they can take their high-paying job with them in a way that they couldn't before because their offices are completely mobile now. So I'm hearing that from realtors. I'm hearing that there are more cash offers. That's still just anecdotal. We don't have good market-wide data on that yet. And the data that we do have actually shows not a big impact at this time, but it's definitely something we're hearing. The other potential is if our numbers remain low and we have an increase in demand for short-term rentals, that would certainly could take more units out of the general rental market. And we are hearing as well that people are looking for more bedrooms per person. We're actually seeing in our survey data that people are having less bedrooms per person. But again, there's a lag there. So people are wanting more rooms so they can have a home office, so that they can have a room for their kids when they're schooling at home, things like that. Factors that could reduce housing price: if we suddenly have a significantly reduced demand for student housing because enrollment drops, or people choose to school online, or people are forced to school online, that could have a short or long-term impact. If our numbers don't stay low and travel has to be reduced again, there can certainly be a reduced demand for short-term rentals. Although I think right now we're seeing them doing fine now that they're able to be open again and people are really interested in being here, where our numbers are great. And then, we're just seeing people, the potential for inability to pay, if it was at a market level, could cause people who are evicting tenants, trying to find new ones, to have to lower prices to find people who can pay them. So I wanted to add that onto our data. That's something that we'll continue tracking. And now I can open up for questions.
Great, thank you so much. I have a bunch of questions myself, but as chair, I'd like to give my colleagues a chance to ask their questions first to see if some of them overlap. I see Martha's hand. I don't see anyone else's yet. We are at 10:34, so we only have 1 hour left and three more big presentations, everyone. So just want to keep that in mind.
Thanks, David. I seem to remember that the last housing snapshot you did had also indicated this drop in population, which everybody was scratching their heads about. I'm not sure if I remember that correctly, but I thought this is like maybe the second year in a row. And I was wondering, with the increase in units that we built, I think you said 2,600, is that right? 2,609? That doesn't make much sense unless maybe there's a smaller household per unit. Do we have that kind of data point?
We definitely are seeing smaller household sizes, and that's actually a trend across upstate New York, is that you can have growing demand for housing units while you have a falling population. Okay. We don't actually know if the models or ACS data showing a reduction in population is real, especially as you get into the 9th year after a census. All of the ACS numbers, they're a survey, but they also kind of work from the last census in how they develop what's statistically significant and what their estimates are. So, we're in the probably least reliable year for that data, hoping that we have more reliable in the next census.
Right, thank you.
David, just one of the comments that you made that we have exceeded our goal for development in the development focus areas of 89. That's not a bad thing. Exceeding that is one of the goals where I think was probably a good thing. The more, the better. So I just wanted to add that one comment. And I'm curious, I have a question here. Do we have any sense of why the rents for the studio and 4-bedroom might be increasing?
I think it's an open question. I do think for studios, it's definitely a result of we didn't have a lot of them, and then we added some, and anything that we add new is going to be at the top of the market. So because it was a small total, when you add a few new studios and they're expensive, that's going to make the average go up. 4 bedrooms, honestly, was a bit of a surprise to me because the general word in the market is that the higher bedroom count, particularly for student type properties, is the demand is going down as students prefer a smaller number of bedroom units.
And the other quick question, why rents are going up and the cost burden for renters is going up and for homeowners down, if you have a thought about that.
It's a more difficult question. I mean, we know that there's a much tighter market for rental. It's a little confusing for people when you look at the vacancy rate. There's a much lower vacancy rate for owner-occupied housing. That's largely because there's less turnover in owner-occupied housing. So I think the average owner-occupied housing turnover is every 7 years. And for rental property, it could be 1 or 2 years. So even if you sit vacant for, a week between tenants in frequent turnover, that significantly increases the vacancy rate. So the difference in cost burden, however, there's a variety of things that can bring down the cost burden for homeowners. It doesn't just mean that new housing you can buy is less expensive. Your cost burden goes down as you pay down a mortgage. So a lot of people who have a very low cost burden for owner-occupied housing bought a long time ago and have been paying down and, have their payments locked in. There's also, we're a big rental market. So there's just constantly more demand for that rental component. And as we see changes in our population makeup, more people delaying family formation and more seniors wanting smaller units, we just have increased competition for that similar segment of 1 to 2 bedroom apartments.
Henry?
Yes, David, I was wondering on the cost burden analysis, I noticed that we spiked up while New York State stayed flat and USA renters went down in 2012, 2018. Would you have expected that because of the affordable housing that's been built in the community?
Sure. The amount of affordable housing that we're building is definitely increased dramatically, but it's still a small percentage of the total units and a small percentage of the new units. So I think we're inching towards 20% of new units being affordable, which means 80% of them are not. And of the ones that are not officially affordable, a significant number of them are at the very top of the market. So then when you look at an average, you're going to see the higher prices in there. Also, we continue to have a shortage of rental housing. Even though we've added a lot of units, we're still far below what the market's demanding.
Great, thank you so much, David. Martha, I see you put your hand back up. I do really want to move on. Is it an important?
Yeah. just to ask if we can get this PowerPoint sent to us.
That would be
You
great.
bet.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you so much, David, for all of your work on this. The story is not so dissimilar from last year's, which was part of my mental confusion. So thank you so much for clarifying. The Tompkins County Area Development, we do have 2 points here. One is the August 2020 HED report, which you have in your packets. And I do not see Heather here. So if there are any questions, hopefully we can ask Kurt, but Kurt is here to do the economic analysis update. So Kurt, maybe you can stand in for Heather, be Heather and Kurt simultaneously. How's that?
Yeah, hi everybody. I'll do what I can, but I'm not involved in all of our initiatives and programs. So if I can't answer something, please forgive my pass.
No worries. So I will just hand it over to you. I know you have a presentation for us.
I do, yeah. Did you want me to talk about the HED report or just?
Sure, if you want to. Really
Well, I didn't look at it or prepare for that, so.
Okay, so let's just go to if anyone had any specific questions about the work that TCAT is doing for our Economic Development Agency. I wanted to give anybody an opportunity to ask Kurt any questions. I do not see anyone, so Kurt.
Well, that was easy.
Yeah, that was. You got off the hook pretty easily on that one.
Yeah.
But if anybody does have questions and you want to send them to me, I can try and find the answers to them. It was a pretty straightforward update.
Yeah.
And anybody who is watching obviously can get the agenda on the Tompkins County Legislature meeting portal and also read that update. So Kurt, take it away.
You got it. Let's share screen here. So I was asked and will provide an update on some of the economic data that we're seeing, but what Heather asked me to actually, I don't know if you know this or not, but give you a little update on a proposal that we submitted to the Appalachian Regional Council to extend a broadband trunk from Hanshaw Road in Ithaca just over 17 miles up to the former Cuga Operating Company plant. This is not an official announcement. I want to stress that, but we've received very positive feedback from ARC. It passed its review. It ranked 3rd in the country for the entire grant round, and it has been approved at all the levels of ARC. We have created a profile for TCAD in the grantee award system. We expect the formal announcement will be in the end of September, but at this point, it's just formality steps. But essentially, like I said, it's simple, and I don't have any pretty pictures to show you other than this map, that it's the red line that you see in the bottom right corner is a proposed line from Southern Tier Network, which was mentioned earlier in this call. And I think Jen Gregory will speak more of this, but they were funded through this same ARC power grant last year. And we effectively applied this year to extend that trunk even further. Part of the delay, I think, in actually announcing a formal award is we're working with the ARC legal team. Our preferred vendor to install, own, and maintain the line is Southern Tier Network. However, there is a provision in the ARC that a vendor as STN cannot be involved in 2 grants at the same time as the vendor. So we've been back and forth with the legal team. I think we found a solution that everybody's happy with that still involves STN, but more on a partnership level instead of a formal contractor. So stay tuned for that, but I just wanted to give you the heads up that it is looking very good to now have access throughout Lansing and all the way up. And CJ Randall was a big part of our team, as were a few other folks, and everybody's excited about this prospect. So just a heads up on that. Does anybody have any questions on that before we get into the economic data?
See Mike? You're muted, Mike.
No, my question can wait till he's done. I'm sorry, Kurt. I'll just wait till you're finished.
Okay, well, that's it for this. But
Oh, okay. Then my question would be, I understand preferred vendor. That's preferred vendor to build this, the trunk line. Who's going to have access off the trunk line, or is it going to be dedicated for Cayuga data juice?
no, it's not solely for data juice. So they will get the power they want, the dark fiber out there, but ultimately it will be up to SDN to, this is my first foray into broadband, so I'm learning a lot. I sat in on a Dryden call this week, but my anticipation is that STN, being a nonprofit provider, would work on all the last mile connections, but it will be available at a fair rate. Instead of we cannot go to a for-profit installer and line maintenance. So we actually, when STN was kind of in the hopper there, when we were talking with the ARC legal team, there was some discussion of TCAD through the foundation actually holding the line. And so that we had to, we got dropped in a moving river and had to figure out how we were going to do that. But it sounds like STN is going to be able to come in and they will do all the contracting. And I don't know if they do it directly or others do customer service in support of that. But essentially it would be a nonprofit partner who's extended across the southern tier.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not familiar with STN either. So do they operate almost like a Spectrum or almost like a Clarity Connect, or do you not?
I can help answer, Kurt.
Yeah, that'd be great, because I don't know.
Sorry, I'm actually on another Zoom with Steve Manning right now. Southern Tier Network is dark fiber ring. When you guys are, show you their website so you can get on that. They're not a last mile service provider. So if there is a point of presence, a POP, that you think along that route you would like to have a connection so that there can be service, that now would probably be a good time to have that conversation when you meet with Steve. They provide the long haul dark fiber, so it's not lit until a last mile service provider lights that fiber. I don't know if that helps, Mike.
Yeah, we are going to get into that, and I know that that Jen, you actually wrote a detailed explanation of that in your report that you sent out that I did send to committee. But the overarching impact is that the net cost to the customers is significantly less, because the nonprofit is doing the main central line that the companies can then build off of. So it saves that cost. So if Mike, if you had a chance to read that report that I sent out, that does explain it to some extent.
Okay. No, I read over most of that. Who would do the last mile then? Would it be like, would it be a private company?
Yep, they work with partner ISPs, such as, and even Spectrum uses some of their lines as well. That industry is very weird. The name is escaping me now. Let's see, Hayfully, but there's Empire Access out of Waverly.
Gotcha.
And they are interested in that because it's much cheaper for them than paying Time Warner's lines for that overhaul and that cost, as Anna said, is shared across the platforms. The other that we'll be talking about, Interconnect Wireless, they would also like to get into a partnership with Southern Tier Network. They're a last mile service provider. Steve has several. Those are just the few that I know locally that are connected.
Right. Thank you so much, Jen. Kurt, do you want to shift to the rest of your presentation? Oh, I'm sorry. Deborah had a question as well.
Yeah, Anna, I'm not sure that I got included in the distribution list on Jen and Kurt's report. But I'm trying to understand, this is a trunk line, and I apologize for my ignorance of how this business works. But in order for people who live off the line, but close to it, to get access to fiber optic broadband, you would have to convince your service provider to hook up. Is that correct?
I would defer to Jen on that one.
Deborah, yes, that would be in partnership with the ISP. So yes, and that is some of the conversations that we have been having with Jen, specifically about the federal funding. There are two pockets of federal funding. One is FCC and one is USDA to expand rural broadband. And so part of what we're trying to explore is whether or not this partnership with STN would tip the boat over onto being cost effective, because that is one of the biggest barriers for ISPs, the private ISPs, to expand out into very rural areas, is that it is, because it's a market system, it is not cost effective for them to do that. So would this partnership with STN in Tompkins County help change the cost benefit for the ISPs to focus exclusively on the last mile, that last component hookup to the houses? So that is something that we're exploring.
So we're going to talk about this more later in the agenda.
Yes, and Jen, that is also, Deborah, the meeting with Steve Manning, which is why we're jumping back and forth. She is in a Zoom with Steve Manning, who is the CEO of STN. To understand that business, it is a nonprofit. There are 3 core counties that are a part of it. There are 2 that have joined on. They do have already lines going into Tompkins County, and this would be a significant additional line coming into Tompkins County. So STN is already here and would be expanded here. So the discussion is, what relationship could we have further to get into the rural areas even more,
especially in the southern part of the county.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you, Anna.
So welcome. All right, Kurt, it's all back to you.
Yeah, I apologize for jumping the shark there. Heather just asked me to update you, and I will say I feel much better knowing that other people don't understand this industry entirely too. So we're all kind of learning on the fly, and that's a good thing. I mean, it's a good problem to have. But anyway, I am here, however, to give you a little update on some of the economic impacts that we've been tracking that you've seen from us regarding COVID. Also want to talk a little bit about some of the data analysis we did on PPP, and then we'll end up with looking at job ads and also look at a year-over-year comparison to get an idea of, we just looking at numbers without actually putting them up next to another set means little. So, and I think that'll transition to Natalie pretty well, and the reason we asked that she go after me. So we'll kick it off with some of the labor and employment statistics that are publicly available that we just happen to curate. This is your initial unemployment insurance claims since the start of COVID. Obviously, way to the left, you see that spike at almost 1,500 initial claims. These are weekly initial claims, and I want to stress that. So if you file your first claim one week, now you're a recurring claimant the following week, right? So these are new people that are unemployed, and though it does tailor off quite nicely to the right, as a matter of fact, since COVID began, we were at the lowest number of initial unemployment claims the first week of August at 150. It then dropped the second week to 105, and we're thinking, all right, it's starting to dip down, and then it's back up to 117 the third week of August, and that's the latest data we have. And I'll stress one more thing, that it's not normal. Year-to-year comparisons, you're looking at roughly 25 every week. So we're still well above comfort level. We're certainly down from our spike, but it's not ideal. And these people are moving on to the recurring customer lines the week after they file. Finally, yesterday, Department of Labor made available unemployment rate numbers for any entity smaller than the state. And I'm sad to say that Ithaca continues to go up. We're going in the wrong direction. So we hit 9.9. So we're kind of hovering in that stagnant area of unemployment. The non-farm employment change year to year is actually improving, but there's still, that's the yellow line you're seeing in the graph to the left. It's still well below where you'd want it to be. But numbers are kind of stuck right now. The needle's stuck where we don't want it. And this is the comparison. Again, I think it matters most when you have something to compare it to. And so the solid line at the bottom is Ithaca. Our unemployment rate is what I focused on here. And we're still better than our region. We're still much better than New York State, which is the long dashed lines along the top. We're just below the federal rate, but I think a lot's going to change here in the fall with kids going back to school. We'll see if it all shuts down again. But we're kind of hovering in an ugly area, and we'll see where it goes. But again, though our numbers aren't good, relatively speaking, we're better than others, I guess, if you want to take away from that. So in July, the Department of Treasury made available all the information on the PPP loans. You heard that acronym thrown around a ton. It is a massive data set. Just the Excel document alone was 25 megabytes, but wanted to take a look at that just to get an idea of what happened with PPP around here. So effectively, I'll do a quick recap. Loans were categorized into two different classes. Class 1 loans being $150,000 and up, and Class 2 loans being less than $150,000. For Class 1 loans, the name of the grantee or the awardee or the business was listed, but they only gave a grant range. So we don't have exact numbers on grant size for those loans. Class 2 loans are the opposite. So no names, no one was listed, but we do have exact loan amounts. And in an effort, I suppose, to provide information, but not to give too much away. I'll let you digest this while I tell you a few facts. So 67 different lenders, the predominance of which were local lenders, did make PPP loans in Tompkins County. There was just, I would say approximately, I did miss 2 Newfield loans, but about 1,300 loans that were approved, and the anticipated job retention is 13,000 jobs retained. That was one of the categories that applicants would have to fill out, and actually the most informative outside of the industry, the lender. It was the jobs retained. That's what we're really looking at, and that certainly was the goal of the PPP. So there were some other demographic details, but very few people submitted them, so I won't present any of that information here. But that's a significant amount of jobs retained through these loans. Over 1/2 of the Class 1 loans, again, those are loans over $150,000. Over half of those were in the $150,000 to $300,000 range. So that was kind of the sweet spot for number of jobs retained. In that category alone, it was an average job retention of roughly 24 jobs. And so that was the sweet spot for Class 1. For Class 2 loans, there were 1,084 loans. I should say Class 1 loans, there were only 171 Class 1 loans. Over 1,000 Class 2 loans. Average loan size was just under $37,000. And what I presented here, jobs retained is the left is the y-axis on the left. And you can see the number of jobs retained by class. These are not averages. These are total jobs retained by those classifications. The black line that trails it is the y-axis on the right, and that is the number of loans. So effectively what I'm trying to show you is input, output, right? So the number of loans that were actually submitted and approved in the larger grant sizes, which you would expect, have more jobs retained. And as you move out to the right, you see the number of loans starts climbing away from the number of jobs retained. So there were a lot of little tiny loans that might have saved one or two jobs, or retained is the term, retained one or two jobs, but the actual effort to retain those, both on the submission side, a lot of companies have relayed that they had to submit multiple times to get approved, and from the lending side to actually have to process these loans, the level of effort, the sweet spot again is kind of back in the $150,000 to $300,000 range, and I'd say even $50,000 to 300 there, the sweet spot of level of effort versus the gains on that. So I will make these slides available afterwards, and you can digest further. And if you have any questions, you can always shoot me a note. So as I mentioned, I gave you numbers, but class 1 loans, 13.6% of the loans, disproportionately high amount of jobs retained. And, these are generally larger companies. The names were provided, all the names you'd recognize for large employers in the region, but fewer number of loans, a lot more jobs retained, whereas you move into class 2, much, much smaller. So the actual average jobs retained for a class 1 loan was 44 jobs per loan, with a small standard error. So, it was kind of close on the mark there. And for the class 2 loans, the smaller loans, an average of 5.5 jobs retained. So there's quite a big difference there in, again, and that goes back to effort and output. So you've heard me bark on this before on the job ads posted, which is an indicator of the jobs that are available, and ads closed, which are a proxy for hires. We're still well below normal. Job ads, the black bars that you see here, continue to be posted. What you see though in the ads closed, which are the yellow, again, a proxy for hires, is that it's lagging way behind. So the rise you see to the far left was kind of when COVID was, pardon the term, but novel. We didn't quite know what was going on. And then we saw how bad it got, and we haven't moved up since. There's been some weeks with spikes in actual job postings, but they're not being closed nearly to the same rate. So we're still kind of lagging on that. One thing I want to show you here, I think, again, it's important to look at a year-to-year comparison. So to the left, so effectively, I looked at the number of job ads posted, just postings here. We're not talking about closures, just who's posting jobs, comparing a 1-month period from 2019 to a 1-month period in 2020. To the left are those occupations that actually this year are having more postings than the previous year. Auto operation and repair, materials recording and distribution. So essentially fulfillment of online orders, stocking, ordering, delivery, those types of things. Those have been high since the beginning of COVID. Healthcare, surprise, nurses, healthcare practitioners, and retail. And I was talking to Natalie a little bit about this, and I don't know if she'll dive in after, but I suspect with retail is booming right now, but we wonder if it's also not related to the fact that a lot of jobs were lost. So when things reopen, they've got to hire more people. So they got to put more ads out. It may not be indicative of that our retail economy is growing. It's just, it was so depressed that now they're flooding the market with ads to get people back to work. We don't know, but what I can say is that in these occupations, 2020 is better than 2019 as far as ads posted. In the middle are a few that are roughly equivalent. I left it at 20. Within 20 ads posted difference between the years. So computers, construction and maintenance is back to, we'll call it normal. And then food and beverage servers, right? And then interesting thing as you see these occupations on the far right there is that these tend to be remote work capable positions, right? Administrative positions, professional services, social services, ed, and then, I mean, personal care is just lagging because we're all afraid to go in and get our hair cut. But But these are things that are just really lagging right now as far as jobs posted. And I think, again, that is relevant to the fact that these people can do work from home. They either didn't lose their jobs, or they're able to function and not, positions weren't lost, essentially. So I put some hot jobs listed on the left. Again, you'll have this and it changes. But the interesting thing, and I was a little surprised, is that overall job postings were only down about 3% from year to year. Total overall job postings. So there's a ton of classes, but I don't know how to explain that other than just to say it's year to year. When everybody was happy in 2019, it's not that far changed from now. So that's just some of the info that I have. Again, you're always welcome. You can ask me questions now. If I can answer them now, I will. If not, I'll follow back up with you. But we're just keeping the data set going. Watching again, this fall is going to be really interesting. So I expect I'll give you something more to see in the future. So that's it.
Kurt, I just had one question. We had asked you to present, throughout the fall, which I really appreciate. So I know you'll be coming back. One data point I would really like to see for the PPP, you talk about the number of jobs per loan. It seems to me, though, it's not necessarily apples to apples to compare a $10 million loan and a $25,000 loan.
Yep.
So it would be really great to see the amount of loan, like dollar amount per loan per employee retained. So even though there are significantly fewer loans in, like, say, the $5 to $10 million range, it might be that we're, saving, or we're spending, $500,000 per employee retained.
Yeah.
So I'd love to see that number.
Yeah. I can. I would say I can get that for you.
Great, thank you.
And actually, what I can do, again, I'll make this presentation available, but I will get that number for you today and send it in an email with this.
That'd be great. That'd be great. And I see Martha's hand.
Yeah, Anna, you got the same question I did. Another question, the PPP it's temporary support. If you could remind us how long that's supposed to go through and what happens then, or do we have any sense whether these jobs are going to be retained after those loan amounts are used up?
Well, that's the $1 million question. And I would tell you that the data that was released just means that the business was approved for a loan. That doesn't mean that they had to accept it. So we do not know how many of these are actually active or, accepted and keeping the people on for the duration that was required. So my hope is that they will release another round of data once that expiry date hits, and we can see if correlate any decline in employment to the end of that date, because they were only required to retain employees for a certain period of time. So to get that money. So we don't know who actually took the money, and I don't know that we'll ever know that. And then we'll see what happens when that expires.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Martha, for the question. And I'd love to jump to Natalie, that is covering the second half, essentially, of this presentation to give us our economic snapshot. Natalie is the Director of Workforce, our Tompkins County Workforce Board. And I'm not sure if I'm saying that correctly because I always screw up the names. So Tompkins County Workforce Development Board, I was so close.
How's that?
I was so close. So yes,
All right.
I'd love to get a brief update from you.
Thank you, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I just want to say how much I appreciate us switching the order. We talk a lot in workforce development about workforce and economic development being co-located, and we are here. So this running order of Kurt going first and me just being able to walk across the office and saying, are you seeing things the same way I am? It works really well here. And so I'm glad that we've been able to pair up like this. You'll notice in the title here, I've used the phrase new economy. And that is exactly what Kurt has just described. I really want to emphasize that I think that where we're going does not look very much like where we were in January. And I'll get into some of the reasons about that. The first thing is just a little bit of a reminder and a refresher about the Tompkins County Workforce Development Board. We are created by federal law that has happened in several stages, the most recent of which was passed in 2013, the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. We're one of 550 workforce boards across the United States, all of which, by the way, are trying to process this COVID moment in their own local way. And so what that means, if you were to step back and throw a dart at a map of the United States, then you would land in a local workforce board jurisdiction. So for us, being here in Tompkins County, geographically, we're actually a smaller workforce board, but I think that that keeps us responsive and nimble. And I'll say a little bit more about that. Again, just for the refresher, these are the members of the Tompkins County Workforce Development Board. And by law, that federal law that I just mentioned, we are required to be 51% private sector led. So this really is the voice of Tompkins County businesses combined with required partners such as Tompkins Workforce New York, which is our career center, the State Department of Labor, you know, and other social services agencies locally and nonprofits. So I speak on behalf of all of these partners that have really been super communicative and coordinated for the past 6 months, essentially. One of the things that we try to understand on a weekly basis that I'm just going to show you in a different way is the chart that Kurt described early on about the onflow of initial unemployment insurance claims. So this is what we're looking at in real numbers. And let me just say our workforce development system, which is all of the federal and state training money that supports workers and businesses, felt the impact immediately as a result of the executive orders in March. So as we look from the top of the chart to the bottom, March to August 15th, which is the most recent number available, these are constituents who are claiming unemployment insurance, new claims. You know, these are folks who normally would have been able to walk into the job center, the career center, which still is not open to the public. And, you know, these are the phone calls and the online applications that we have seen on a weekly basis. Kurt showed you on the graph, and I will just emphasize the early weeks, March 28th and April 4th, where we saw a jump that we've never seen here before. And I'll also point your attention to August 8th and August 15th. We have been progressively seeing lower numbers of initial claims, but I just have to emphasize that there is still a lot of movement in this area, and a lot of that reflects that original additional $600 weekly top up now being reduced. So we're trying to understand that. But that's an idea of real numbers here. Early on, you all may remember, we immediately put in place a new job board as those unemployment numbers were going up. We created something called Workforce Redirect. And the idea was, not knowing very much what the next week would look like, we wanted to make sure that any new job offers in Tompkins County were brought together in one place. So this is businesses and employers of all kinds reaching out to the workforce development system. This is a scan of Facebook postings and ads on Indeed and LinkedIn notifications. So we really have tried to bring everything together. And if you go to the Tompkins County, New York.gov job board, which is the Workforce Redirect, this is what you'll see. And so we have tried to bring as much of that information together in one place. And as Kurt described, hiring is happening. The job postings are there, but I really do want to emphasize another one of his charts, which is that hiring is lower, much lower than last year. Job opportunities are fewer, and the ones that are available are very much changing in between industries. So we're doing all we can to understand that, but we want to make sure that the public knows that this site is available and that we're posting as much as we can. As a workforce development board, the very next thing that we did was we rallied. We embraced our advocacy role because a lot of that workforce money that arrives here in the county is governed by federal law. So those are federal payouts that pass through the state and arrive at Tompkins County. We followed the lead and indeed added our voice nationally to the National Skills Coalition and the National Association of Workforce Boards. We wrote to the entire leadership of the House and the Senate and our local representatives and said that we support a $15 billion investment in workforce development at this time. You can see here every member of the Workforce Development Board, every member of the Tompkins County Legislature, and senior administration with the county signed this letter. We're one of very few local areas that did this, but I think that this is actually a point of pride, that we were all ready to link arms and speak in a unified way. We have not seen many results, and I am sorry to report that in all of the COVID stimulus packages, workforce development has not fared well. And I'm happy to answer any more questions about that to the degree that I know the answers. The one thing that I did want to emphasize to you when we're talking about initial unemployment insurance claims is the change that has happened in terms of the makeup of those claims. So this is a chart best read from right a year ago to left. This is a state chart, and this is the age component of those who are claiming unemployment insurance this year compared to a year ago. And I want to just point your attention to the navy blue bar at the bottom of all three of these bars here, the navy blue band. This time last year, our unemployment insurance claims in the county, and I'm talking about county at the moment, we had about 300 people claiming unemployment insurance. We're not able to know the demographic breakdown of those, but we have no reason to think that we wouldn't mirror the rest of the state. As we have moved forward to that 10,000 number of people who have accessed unemployment insurance, we think that this has disproportionately affected here the claimants who are 25 years and younger. And this is a reflection of the impact to our retail, hospitality, and tourism sector, and retail as well. So what we conclude from this statewide chart is that the recession that resulted from the pandemic has disproportionately affected young people. And we really do want to emphasize that because we know that that is very, very likely the case here in the county. So that's where we've been. Looking forward into the reopening of the economy, we as a workforce development system are pretty much doing the same thing as a lot of the speakers here today, which is just trying to understand the numbers. We're trying to go a step beyond that and think about 2021. Now, if we were going to do a proper employment and skills strategy here locally, we'd want to talk about 5 to 10-year targets. We just don't have enough information for that at this point in time, but we are bringing together lots of threads and lots of strands to understand employment and the jobs market and the demand for skills over the next year. So I have put a number on it. Our goal is to get 200 people back to work every week throughout 2021. So that's over the course of 50 weeks. Some of those people may return to work just as a result of the labor market naturally calling them back. And some of them will be in a very, very different position. We know that we have to factor in our local workforce development programming and funding that in January was pretty much based on, in workforce development, what we think of as employment plus skills plus jobs. That'll get us to economic growth. This 200 people goal that we're setting for ourselves is now very different. So we have to consider employment plus skills plus jobs plus pandemic. And what I'm saying with that math is that into 2021, we are planning for a pandemic economy. We don't know exactly what this strategy is going to look like just yet, but we have interviewed every member of the Workforce Development Board and businesses beyond the board. And I can tell you in one voice, this is what everyone is saying. These are our organizing principles for a strategy. We need a completely new understanding of skills in the county. We want to be able to understand how PPE works in, how working from home should be considered when we talk about skills. And this is skills that workers can acquire, but also a very different demand of skills by businesses in our county. I was really, really interested to hear David's report on housing and you know, talking about high paying jobs and bringing that income into the buying market. And one of the things that we are considering here is whether or not we should go forward with a talent attraction strategy. And in order to understand that, we first need to know how and whether employers' requests for skills are changing. I also think that we are going to have to really redesign programs differently so that there is subsidized employment money for job creation. Yes, we've talked very much about the jobs that have been preserved with the PPP loans, but there's a lot of job loss as well. And so we're really thinking about how our workforce programs can play a role in that arena. We absolutely want to build in the principle of race and equity into our workforce development programs in a different way than they have been traditionally here in the county. And we're doing lots of outreach and research and listening to understand that. We've also been told that we should have an emphasis on climate and sustainable energy and the green economy. We are watching and looking and researching everywhere for grants that can assist us in that. And as I briefly mentioned earlier, we want to have a new understanding of teleworking and working from home. You know, if you just think of how much all of our work lives and our learning and our home lives have changed. If work is now happening from home, we need to be able to understand that, and we want to be able to build a bridge between that new setting and how employers are interacting with their workforce. And so there's lots of questions in there, but that's my remit. As I said, we're going to consider working throughout a pandemic now, and those programs that we're bringing as much money in for as possible are going to be designed to support businesses and workers. We continue with this line that workforce development is economic development. And as I said earlier, we really all as a community and as individual entities do benefit from being just across the hallway from TCAD. And we're going to try to understand the impact of how this program money is designed and spent throughout 2021. Please, please, please reach out. We're on Twitter. Please call me. Please email me. And I just wanted to say, in conclusion, thank you to Martha and other members of the legislature for having us listen into the Intergovernmental Relations Committee, which has been really, really valuable and helpful and supportive of us. So that's everything from here.
Thank you so much, Natalie. A couple housekeeping things. When I put this agenda together, I was not planning for the housing presentation that we had. So that has thrown the schedule off a bit. So I'm hoping that people will be willing to stay a few minutes over for the broadband quick intro. So I just wanted to check with committee members to see if people are receptive or open to that. Great. I see a thumbs up from Annie. If people can't, of course, it'll be recorded. Mike, is that all right with you? Martha?
Like 5 minutes.
All right. And Henry?
Yes.
Great. Thank you. And Natalie, the one thing that I did want to note that you and I have discussed extensively is bringing back to attention the fact that the new economy is not going to be like what we had prior to COVID because of all of the shift to online telecommuting, shift in how people do work, where the jobs are. The fact that this is not in the stimulus packages hasn't been discussed for future ones, so that there is lack in workforce development is I think one of the most grave issues that we are facing. And I just want to bring that up to the fore because from my discussions with you, that is my greatest concern. And I wanted Deborah to be part of that as well, because we have been discussing green workforce and, my concern about that being impacted. So I see that there are a bunch of questions. Let's run through these really quickly. Martha, your hand was up first.
Thanks. On the priorities for 2021, I really feel strongly that a key priority should be matching the people who are already here with the opportunities that are already here, as opposed to an aggressive talent acquisition strategy. Bringing people from outside, I mean, on small numbers to fill particular gaps, okay, but the issues of housing are only exacerbated when we're trying to bring more people in, especially when we have high needs for the folks who already live here. So I would really emphasize that, and perhaps working with TC3 is a big opportunity for that. Thanks.
Great point, Martha. And I have Annie next.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation, Natalie. And so very quickly, when you were hired, my one and only concern was that you were overqualified for this position. So we didn't mean to, but throwing a pandemic in here, a social justice movement, and an economic upset, I know you are up for it, so I am really glad that you're in that position. So I want to thank you for that. And so as you mentioned, regarding some of the demographics and trying to get more information. So is that something, I mean, you kind of said it, but I'd like to just want to echo, I'd like to see more information, from the sets we do have, if we can, or going forward, anything, especially for the job creation or the people out of work, as Martha said, especially local, whether it's their sex, their race, in addition to the other demographics.
Yeah, I really agree. We need to be able to sort of pick apart local statistics that we actually don't have. And the major challenge with labor market data is that it's 2 months behind. And so we are trying to patch together a combination of, like I said, those state charts and sort of really local narrative and making a decision based on the industries that we know were hit hardest here. So As I said earlier, we really do enjoy and appreciate the relationship with TCAD, who are able to do a lot of that data work for us. But I totally agree with you. We need to know a lot more about race, gender, age, and particularly if we're going to do an employment and skills strategy, we need to be able to measure those things. And so we are setting ourselves targets. And I think that will push our data questions and interest forward.
Wonderful. And I see Deborah has.
Thank you.
Sorry, Annie. Deborah, you had a question?
Just a comment. I thought it was very interesting, Natalie, that you said the direction we're moving in or where we're headed is not where we were. Yeah, we need a strategy that reacts to the changes that are happening, but I also view this as a real opportunity to shape the direction we're moving in. So while I agree with Martha that we don't want to be recruiting talent from outside, we may want to be recruiting employers from outside. And you know my penchant for creating the green economy as we move forward. So I want to thank you and Anna for working with our Climate and Sustainable Energy Board on these issues.
Absolutely. A lot of work to come, and Natalie has prioritized, and I really appreciate it, the need for a workforce development strategy. We haven't had an update for a long time. Now is absolutely the appropriate time to do it. So on top of all the rest of your work, I look forward to seeing progress on that.
Yes. Congratulations, you're not overqualified anymore.
Exactly. So
I never was. Well, I'll just sort of braid together Deborah and Anna and Martha's comments. Thank you very much for your thoughts on the talent attraction notion. I think that this skills map that we're going to create about the existing skills in the county and the new skills desired by the employers who are here currently is going to tell us a lot. And then we can take a step forward on how we direct those investments locally for residents. And I do think that in terms of just a timeline, I welcome the opportunity to be here and communicate this because we actually haven't seen each other in a while. We've been sort of picking up the other side of the health issue. And so our goal is to have a skills map of the county in place by Thanksgiving, and then to use December to sort of finalize what a 2021 strategy looks like. And all of that's being done in consultation, of course, with the Workforce Development Board. So just to give you an idea of the schedule, that's where we are. And yes, thank you for emphasizing climate, sustainable energy, and green economy. We want to make sure that that's in there big. And we consult with Case and Sue Collada as much as possible. So we're having conversations with all of those interest groups here.
Wonderful. I know that this is an ongoing conversation. Natalie and I have talked about coming back every month and doing an update. I think that is appropriate right now, given what we are going through. So I look forward to updates next month, Natalie. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks everyone.
So I just wanted to let everyone know Amy Hendricks was on, she's here to give us a very quick announcement. Amy Hendricks.
Hi everyone, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Okay,
we have 6 Zooms going at once at the EOC, so it's getting a little creative on how we do this. So just as far as updates, we are releasing a statement about a partnership that we have with Cornell that should be coming out in the very near future. Just, in their engagement with us as to the COVID response, they will be providing some funding and relief to the county. So that's about to come out momentarily. We've worked with them. So it's been great to have, some relief coming in. Obviously, everyone is struggling with this, as your meeting has shown. We'll continue to do that. As far as other updates, we are in the midst of budget work. And so we're focused on that, as well as all of the other players with the pandemic. So that's really all I have for today, at least for this committee, and there'll be more updates coming in the near future, I'm sure.
That is a wonderful, wonderful announcement, Amy. Thank you for all of your work, all of you on that. And I know you are all hair on fire, running through the hallways, trying to get the budget as soon as possible. So thank you all for that work as well. I'll let you go because I know you have 5 other Zooms to keep on, but I did want to make sure people got that announcement. Thank you.
All right, thank you all.
So we have the final quick discussion with Jen Gregory. As I've said previously, this is going to be an ongoing conversation. It's a good thing that Jen is really sharp and speaks very quickly, and has been doing this for about 12 years already. Yeah, I'm gonna let you take it away. Executive Director of ST8, of which we have been a member now for 3 years.
Thank you, Anna.
Absolutely.
I am going to share my screen quickly because I like maps. I think they can expedite this discussion as well. So this is from that Brindisi report that was shared. Here's what I wanted everyone to see. The dark green is the highest average speed. The lightest is the lowest. There's the big difference between the southern tier and downstate. So on that bright note, that showcases there's a lot of work to be done, and satellite just doesn't cover it. That was one of my arguments that I gave to the State Assembly last year when I spoke with them. The other item I wanted to show you, so you've heard a lot today about Southern Tier Network. This is their website, and they have a map that I'm going to try to bring up here. Why do I have slow internet? And I just wanted to show you they do have a presence. So this is their overall network. We started this, I was very engaged in 2009 out of the last time I felt there would be this much federal stimulus come to the area through the ARRA stimulus package. We applied for a $24 million project to run this fiber through all of these 11 counties. We got a call in for due diligence, much like Kurt had been through, where they said, congratulations, we saved the best projects for last because they needed the least amount of work. However, at that point in time, the teachers union lobbied for funds, and they took the funding that was left in the BTOP program to run the fiber. So that's why this map is only filled in on this side. We were not able to complete this portion, but Corning came in, they committed $10 million to the project at that time and said, we need to cover this area. And they took the lead on the Southern Tier Network. So little by little over the last 10 years, I've been begging and pleading and writing grants to get this extended to as many more places as we can. So I'm thrilled about TCAT. I thought they'd be the #1 project for power, but I'm so excited that that is moving forward. So I wanted to show you, they do have a presence in Tompkins County. And another to show you the map this are. Pardon, Anna?
Could you give us a general overview of what they are?
Sure, thank you. So Southern Tier Network is a dark fiber network that is municipally owned. Steve Manning is the CEO of the company. He worked for BOCES for many years. And I think he became CEO in 2016 or 17. Municipally owned, their board members are from Chemung, Sigler, and Steuben County. So they make the decisions to put any profits back into the expansion or support of this line. They work with many last mile service providers that deliver service to the user. Southern Tier Network is not a last mile service provider. They will not run fiber to, they will not run that last mile fiber to the home, but it reduces the cost that it makes it very feasible for someone in this industry to tap onto this network. And so dark fiber, the means of that means it needs to be lit. So the fiber's run, but it's not used until you have that last mile service provider using it. It's like the highway.
Excuse me, which counties did you say? You said Chemung, Schuyler, and who else?
Yes, Chemung, Schuyler, and Steuben.
Thank you.
They all, so we've mentioned, and Anna sent around an email about our regional coalition that we started here with Broome, Shenango, Delaware, and Cortland. Well, Tompkins is certainly welcome to join. When you look at the geography, we're over here. You already have a strong connection with Southern Tier Network, and they're much further ahead than where we are in the eastern side of the region. They went out to bid, so they have this dark fiber ring, and last year they went out to bid and they were awarded. They said, okay, what do we have this asset, we know this means something. How do we get fiber to the home for every home in our county? So they put in to submit a bid to have this assessed and work on the design. Fujitsu partnered with them. They're assessing that. They will have some recommendations, I think as early as next month on that. That they are doing not only for these three counties, Chemung, Schuyler, and Steuben, but also Yates and Tioga County. They're in that study. Even though they're not on the board, they partnered with them for this project. I asked Steve Manning, I said, would it be a possibility for Tompkins to join as you have infrastructure through there? He said, absolutely. So Anna is setting up a meeting with him and a few other stakeholders. Katie, if she's still on the call, she's in that as well, to discuss more about what can Southern Tier Network do for you. Steve has dedicated his organization. This is what they do. I'm encouraging, so Shenango, Delaware, Broome, and Cortland came to me locally and said, what can we do? Because we're all going through this crisis together. And I said, well, if you have a local lead, is it worth talking together? But we're just trying to assess with a rough estimate the neighborhoods that are well underserved. And we'll see where that goes. But right now, I think as we alluded to earlier with the FCC, the federal maps that we have where we're served, and Empire State Development where they're served and falling in the spectrum footprint, we don't yet have a good handle of a map, so we don't know what to ask for when these federal opportunities do come around. I do anticipate one that will be out before November, but I do see additional federal investments in the spring. So I'm hoping to align some efforts for those.
Jen, just in summary, Tompkins is sort of in the middle of all of this. We already have, unlike Cortland, Shenango, Delaware, Broome does as well, but we have STN coming in already. What you're saying is STN would consider bringing us into their infrastructure for the study, the assessment, and ST8 would consider bringing us into the effort with ST8 to push for federal funding to support the expansion of the dark fiber. Is that so? We could be in both programs. Is that
so
true?
That's right. It's thank you. It's a little convoluted because it is as nature. So Southern Tier Network, they would be willing to discuss bringing you in for that study, and that's where you're going to get some really good data because they're way further than we are. We have been working on grant proposals and will continue to be. I put money aside for under our EDA CARES program to work on grant writing and bring in assistance as these opportunities come about. The problem is we don't know what to ask for yet. So we're starting with that baseline.
You are applying for ARC funding, correct? So that would be federal funding, or is that?
Correct. And so that's going to fall, I do believe there'll be a strong push for this. That funding that TCAT went for, I spoke with ARC in April. They recognize that they might need to allocate more funds for broadband next year for that, and they've done that in the past. The other item I wanted to mention, can you see the switching tabs, is from our website under news and events. We will be hosting an informational series on this topic. So September 15th, we'll be meeting. And although it's those 4 counties, it'll be a description of what we're trying to do, a summary of Congressman Brindisi's report, and outreach to municipalities that would like to be involved. Later in September, October, we're hoping to meet with the schools. And then October 20th, we'll be having a program where Steve will talk about the Southern Tier Network. We'll have a wireless solution provider there, Interconnect Wireless. They ran a model last year that was very successful in Norwich for affordable housing, and it worked. So now we're going just not only from where the infrastructure is, but the accessibility for our population that needs it the most. And also we will have Matt Beckwith here. He's an emergency service coordinator to discuss what they're working on and define the difference between cell phone reception and internet service. And hopefully we'll continue to have another program in November. So there's on the Southern Tier Network side, that infrastructure and the study. On the Southern Tier 8 side, hopefully more education for others and concerns and alignment with grant programs.
Deborah, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I noticed that I was trying to answer Mike's question and now I'm brain dead. I noticed that the dark fiber network that STN has in Tompkins County runs up from Tioga to the through the southern part of our county, which is where we have the most people who are just not able to get hooked up. So I guess this ties in with Mike's question. As I understand it, in order to turn dark fiber into lit fiber, you have to have a last mile provider who's willing to hook end users up with that dark fiber network. Is that right?
That's correct. So that IWC, that Interconnect Wireless, that we're hoping to speak in October, that we're having to speak in October, those are the types of folks you'd like to make that request to.
Okay.
Or Empire Access. So these are good questions for Steve too. How do you start marketing your area and say, look, we'd like to have you invest in our community?
That's great. Thank you, Jen. And then I remember my other question. So I'd be curious to know what it's going to cost to extend that out to that endpoint in Lansing.
I don't know what that cost would be. The number that we've been given over the last 10 years to run fiber is $40,000 per mile. And that's pretty consistent across the board, different providers across the country. This wireless solution that appears adequate, you're talking $8,000 per mile. So now it's starting to get affordable.
So the wireless network, is that similar to, is that a radio wave system?
I don't know the details on that. It's similar. It casts a wave. It casts a wave across that.
So,
but I'm not sure how similar that is with probably what you're used to with emergency services and those radio towers.
That's something that I will follow up on and get information to everyone. specifically researching the wireless, because that is a question that I've had. One of the, so just so we're all aware, so the another big barrier is not having a clear sense of what dark wires we actually, dark fiber fully that we have, because some dark fiber was run 20, 30 years ago by companies and was left in the ground as potential to be connected in at a later date. So we don't have a full picture across the southern tier of the full network of dark fiber that could be linked into. Nor do we have a full assessment of connectivity, which houses do or don't have connectivity, because the current system of assessment is by census blocks. So when Jen is talking about not fully knowing what to ask for, part of it is piecing together what we already know, so that we don't repeat things that we already know and waste money, when ultimately what we want to prioritize is laying line. But we don't want to lay line inefficiently. So it's chicken or the egg. How much money do you put in to get the information, and how much money do you put in to actually lay the line? With the latter being the priority. So I understand the conundrum, and I wanted to explain that to everyone. The other thing that we have talked about in the past is, why I wanted to bring this to everyone's attention is because STN would create a regional approach. Part of their ability to be cost effective is because it spans multiple counties. If we try and go municipality by municipality, where everyone lays their own line and each municipality owns their line, and we break up in that way, we may actually create unintended consequences of competition or inefficiencies. So that's some of the things that we've discussed, is what are the benefits of doing a regional approach, and STN has done that. So the idea of at least tapping in for the backbone with STN into the municipalities, and the municipalities could discuss owning lines, connecting homes. Part of the discussion of municipalities jumping in and being part of the competition, and I know, Mike, this was something you brought up in email exchanges. What I have heard it likened to is water and sewer. Municipalities own and manage water and sewer. Why not internet? And the reason, broadband, the reason that it has been brought up in this context is because in a market model, it is not financially feasible for the private companies to go to the most rural houses to date. And so they don't, and then rural people are at a great disadvantage. Municipalities don't work on that same model. They work for their residents, for their constituents. And so based on public funding, that could lead to greater outreach into the most rural areas, is some of the discussion that's happening. At least that is definitely the discussion that has happened in Dryden, plus increasing the competition so that it isn't a monopoly. So I figured that would start a conversation with you, Mike, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. You're on mute.
Okay, yeah, no, I just want to remind people that while that system works somewhat for water, we're trying to connect rural homes at this point, and they're going to have the same issues that connecting water and sewer has. I don't have water and sewer, and I'm probably never going to get water and sewer, and I'm only a mile from the water line. Mm-hmm. So to act as if the municipalities are going to be able to do this any cheaper than a lot of other people, I don't really see it. So that's, I guess, why when people talk about municipal broadband, I go, yeah, I mean, that's kind of what the trunk line is. But for that last mile, I can't imagine you're going to be able to start a whole company that's going to do this better than the ISPs that are actually already doing it. That's just my 2 cents. I mean, maybe they can, but it seems to me that when water goes down, yeah, you have a whole system in place, but you've got a lot of different teams working on that. I mean, my town is the one that puts the water pipes in the ground, not Bolton Point. but then Bolton Point will go and maintain those, but we're not building out into North Lansing with water yet.
Right. No, and I think that that's a great point. And so, that's why I really wanted to bring Jen in. And also why STN and partnering with STN is attractive to me. Because I agree with you. I don't think that it's feasible without dark fiber backbone that would significantly reduce the price. The idea of the municipalities being a part of the solution is simply for competition. As was pointed out in Brindisi's report, there are many municipalities and counties that are only served by one company. And so, sheer market competition discussion as far as competitive pricing that has shown competitive pricing obviously being shown to work significantly in very urban areas. For example, downstate where you see a difference between a monthly package of very high speed being $70 or less per month versus in upstate, very rural, $200 to $300 a month for 1/100th of the speed. So that's the discussion we're having, and yet the technology, the fiber is the same technology. So we're trying to figure out solutions to that, and it does seem to be that partnering multiple pieces of this will be necessary to have it be cost effective and fully reach the very rural areas, as well as seeking the federal funding, both the USDA funding and the FCC funding. But part of the limitations for them is that they do not have updated maps. So according to them, we're covered when we're not. So part of that is partnering with our federal representatives, currently Tom Reed. We'll see after November where we are, but currently getting them all to understand that the assessment of the mapping is absolutely critical. Updating of the mapping, absolutely critical. Anyway, Annie, and I'll let you have the last word. We will continue this conversation. And as I said, we're having a conversation next week with Steve Manning, and I will come back with updates.
Thank you. And thank you for the presentation, Jen. So my question is, as far as bringing in internet, and granted, I don't know a lot about this either, but so in my area, I'm just outside of Trumansburg, we have a phone company where the phone company is now upgrading their lines and have been over the years so that you can get internet off of that same line. And I'm just wondering if there's a system that we have in I believe last mile for phone service. Does it make sense to go after the phone companies to upgrade, or does it make more sense to do this internet, which is separate lines?
I think it's both. And there are a lot of phone companies that have expanded, particularly with the new New York State broadband program. They've been able to run a lot of this dark fiber as well. The trick with that is we don't know where they're putting that yet or what their plans are. That really held us up being, even with the acquisition with Spectrum to Charter too. It's very hard to get that information. We've begged from ESD, we're not seeing it. And that's the other part of that as well, going through that assessment with Southern Tier Network or trying to do it yourselves. Some of this may not be a funding request. It may be, can we reach out to the phone companies and say, when are you going to get here? That's why those maps are significant.
Mm-hmm.
All right, thank you very much.
No, it's a great point.
Thank you. Great question.
Yeah, I think part of that is proprietary, that they don't share necessarily their plans, Annie, and it's such a great question.
Right, we were told 15 years ago when we bought our house that the phone company was going to upgrade the internet service that was provided to the house. We just got it last month.
Oh.
It's a little better.
Well, I want to thank everyone for staying after. Again, there was one extra presentation I wasn't expecting when we put the agenda together. So this is a hugely important topic. I really appreciate it. But I do, Jen, thank you for your patience. I know we'll be continuing this conversation. And I did want to also huge shout out to our county clerks, Kathy, Deputy Clerk Michelle, Kathy Covert, Michelle Coco, for staying after for an extra half an hour, and our tech staff. I really appreciate it. You all are, I think, are not thanked enough for everything you do. So really, truly thank you for the extended time. And for all the committee members for your patience. These are really important topics in this current COVID economic crisis. I think this committee's, the need for these conversations is so critical right now. So that we're all informed and we can identify the policies that we need to prioritize so that we can really work and emphasize economic recovery over the next year. So thank you so much for your patience, and we'll continue all of these conversations. Thank you, everyone. We have just in the meeting, the agenda, we have an information only budget transfer ITCTC. We do not need to vote on it. Just pointing that out. And we can hopefully do the liaison assignments next month. I really apologize for not having that time. And I'm going to call this meeting to a close. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Anna, for